So as you guys know, last weekend was the big Anthony Joshua fight versus Carlos Takam. And off the back of that, I've received a crazy amount of comments, a few emails, Facebook messages, Twitter messages, and the majority are wanting to know who would win between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker. Who will Anthony Joshua fight next? So rather than responding to different comments, I thought let's make a video, let's put it out there, and I'll put my thoughts all in one place. Let me start by saying anyone who got in touch off the back of those videos, anyone who supported the channel over the weekend, I do appreciate it. We're nearing in on 6,000 subscribers. We're nearing in on 2 million views on the channel. I believe very feasible that we can surpass both of those milestones in the next week or so. So genuinely appreciate all the support. But without further ado, let's roll into it. Firstly, people asking me, will the Deontay Wilder and Joseph Parker fights happen? I'm dubious, and let me explain why. And I think this is important for people who are tuning into my channel from abroad, be that Americans, be that New Zealand, be that other places in the world. But I'm going to give you my honest thoughts as to why I'm dubious that these fights actually happen in the next 6 to 9 months of the year. For a start, Joshua in the UK is what I would describe as a pay-per-view phenomenon. Now, I don't have the figures for the pay-per-view that Joshua Takam, so I'm not going to refer to those. But what I would say is Joshua is at the point of celebrity now where he can sell out a stadium like the stadium in Wales this weekend, or Wembley Stadium in my belief, for literally, he could probably, if Anthony Joshua was announced for a summer date at Wembley without an opponent, it was Joshua versus TBA, I genuinely believe he could sell out Wembley at this stage without an opponent announced. So that tells you that AJ has the capability to sell 90,000 tickets, I'd say an average price of somewhere between £50 and £100, regardless of the opponent. I mean, we saw this weekend. I think they sold out 78,000 seats for this against Kubrat Pulev. Kubrat Pulev is not, a guy who's going to be known to too many casual boxing fans in the UK. In the box office, Joshua is a celebrity. I mean, I associate with a lot of boxing fans who don't actually know that I run this channel, because I don't make a big deal about it. But I had 5 or 6 people at work who don't know I run this channel tell me they bought the fight this weekend. I had 5 or 6 people in my family who I know bought the fight, who aren't really boxing fans. I went to the barber's to get my hair cut on the weekend. My barber's asking, are you watching the fight tonight? Yeah, I've bought it. Joshua is someone who is a real celebrity in the UK sport community now. And I use that on purpose, saying sports fans rather than boxing fans. Now, further to that, I would also say that a large number of Anthony Joshua fans are not people who would necessarily describe themselves as boxing fans. They're pure Anthony Joshua fans. These are not people who sit there watching fights in the featherweight division. These are not guys who necessarily will have heard of Carlos Takam prior to paying 20 quid to watch him fight on the past weekend. So Joshua kind of appeals within the UK to a set of the market that aren't really obsessed with seeing a 50-50 fight. These people, and this is not everyone. Of course, there are people like myself who pay for Anthony Joshua fights, who would love to see him in a 50-50 fight. But what I'm getting at is there is a substantial proportion, and I believe it to be the majority, of Anthony Joshua customers in the UK. What they actually want to see is Anthony Joshua unleashing devastating punches on an opponent and scoring highlight reel knockouts. In many ways, they would rather see Joshua face someone who's a punching bag type fighter rather than someone who uses movement and uses angles, etc. Because what they want to see is AJ in full flow, in steam train mode, putting punches in bunches and laying people out. And I'm sorry if I'm oversimplifying that. I appreciate that there's that set of the market, there's the hardcore set of the market, and then there's a shade of grey in the middle. But I think the majority of UK boxing fans who buy Anthony Joshua pay-per-views probably fall into that casual market. And that's why Joshua has been able to hit numbers in the UK. You know, the Klitschko pay-per-view supposedly did something like 1.25 million pay-per-view buys. And he's probably at the stage now where he can do 700, 800, maybe even more than that, 800,000 pay-per-view guys against Carlos Takam. So my suggestion is that Anthony Joshua could go on sale for a summer fight in 2018 right now without any opponent, sell out Wembley Stadium and do 750,000 pay-per-view buys just on the fact that he's fighting. And because of that, it makes it very, very hard to negotiate with Eddie Hearn and Team Joshua, because they know that at this point in time, they can make that amount of money literally by fighting a random top 20 ranked heavyweight. So why are they incentivized to take a riskier fight when they are going to have to give the opponent a substantial cut of the purse? You know, let's say AJ fought Deontay Wilder. How much is Deontay Wilder going to want? 15 million? 20 million? 25 million? And it's a huge risk to Joshua. Now, I'm not saying Joshua's probably a favourite in that fight, but I'm not saying who wins at this stage, but I'm saying that's a huge risk to Joshua. So you've got to ask yourself, if you were Joshua and you were Eddie Hearn and you were Matchroom in that machine and you wanted to protect your investment, would you be inclined to take an easier fight, take the majority of the purse, sell 90,000 tickets, sell 750,000 pay-per-view buys, or would you be inclined to double those numbers but have to pay out a hell of a lot more money against a guy like Deontay Wilder? I don't know. And I actually think, and I'm being really honest here, and American fans, New Zealand fans won't like this, I actually think that Deontay Wilder and Joseph Parker aren't really the biggest names at present. You know, I did this survey today. I spoke to several people at work who'd bought the pay-per-view. I spoke to several friends of mine, several family members of mine who'd bought the pay-per-view. I'm going to be honest, at least 3/4 of the people I spoke to had never heard of Deontay Wilder and had never heard of Joseph Parker. These sort of casual boxing fans aren't even really aware that there's multiple versions of the heavyweight title. They would just tell you that Joshua is the heavyweight champion of the world. So what I'm getting at is, what I'm implying is Joshua's core customer is not people like you or I. It's not people who make YouTube videos discussing boxing. It's not people like yourself who tune in to videos online to discuss boxing. It's people who actually don't know that there are multiple versions of the heavyweight title. You know, maybe I'm oversimplifying this, and I'm not looking to generalise. Clearly, there'll be all sorts of people with varying degrees of knowledge. But when you're dealing with that type of casual fan, I actually think that, and I know this is an outlandish comment I'm about to make, I actually think that an Anthony Joshua Dillian Whyte rematch could probably do better numbers than a Joseph Parker rematch. Sorry, than a Joseph Parker fight. Because Dillian Whyte's a British fighter. He's a known commodity to the UK fans. He brings that huge WWE style hype and bad behaviour outside the ring that really sells a fight and generates viral videos and huge interest, etc. Whereas Joseph Parker's more of a sort of mild-mannered gentleman type figure, which is all very well and good, but probably doesn't help to shift pay-per-views. So what I'm getting at is the options that AJ has available to him. The Dillian Whyte fight is probably a bigger fight at the box office than the Joseph Parker fight. I really believe that to be true, especially after Dillian Whyte has sold the fight. There's been a press conference, there's been a scrap at the weigh-in, that sort of thing. So AJ can probably pay Dillian Whyte a substantially smaller purse on the basis that Whyte doesn't have a belt. He goes into the fight with the confidence that he's already defeated Dillian Whyte in the pro ranks, and it's probably a less risky fight for him than fighting one of the champions. So the politics of the sport, the commercials of the sport, etc., make me highly dubious that these fights will happen next. You've also got to factor in the David Haye situation. You know, David Haye is a huge name in the UK. You know, David Haye and Tony Bellew, I'm led to believe, sold somewhere in the region of 750,000 pay-per-views, which is tremendous, tremendous numbers. If David Haye beats Tony Bellew in the rematch, and he is a heavy favourite too, the Joshua-David Haye fight is a huge fight in the UK. And you've got to remember that at this point, AJ isn't a pay-per-view star in the States. AJ is a pay-per-view star in the UK. And AJ versus David Haye pay-per-view may well be the biggest ever pay-per-view we have had in Great Britain. I don't believe that AJ versus Deontay Wilder, AJ versus Joseph Parker do as many pay-per-views as AJ David Haye, because David Haye is such a well-known commodity. He's a great talker as well. You know, that he'd appeal to all sorts of fans. He can really sell a fight, etc. So what I'm getting at is AJ has, you know, huge domestic options that are probably as big a fights as the unification fights in terms of the box office, and he's not having to pay the huge premiums to the opponents on the basis that they've got a belt that they're looking to utilise to extract a higher proportion of the split. Yeah, that's just my take on it. And you could say that Dillian Whyte and David Haye, especially Haye with all his age and his injuries, and Dillian Whyte having already been beaten, you could say they're easier prey. They're higher risk for lower reward. So I'm not convinced these fights happen. And the reason I'm not convinced these fights happen, in a nutshell, is that I don't think Joshua's core market, the core majority who buy his pay-per-views, I don't think these people care about Joseph Parker and Deontay Wilder. In fact, a lot of them don't even know they exist. And that may be hard to believe if you're sitting in the US or if you're sitting in New Zealand. But a video of Dillian Whyte and Joshua going at it in a press conference will generate far, far, far more interest than saying there's a New Zealand guy with a belt who's going to fight Joshua. And whether that's a sad reflection of the state of boxing or not, that's what it is in my belief. So, do the fights happen? Skeptical. Let's put that to one side. What happens if they do happen? Who would I pick? Now, the first thing to say is there are no certainties here. These are three very, very good fighters. These are not fighters who I could say... These are not fights where I could say one guy will definitely win. You know, I'm not in a position to say that about any of the matchups. Interestingly, all three of these guys have a lot of strengths. All three of them have real concerns. You know, Joseph Parker, very defensively open. Very, very defensively open. Deontay Wilder moves back in straight lines with his hands down. When he gets an opponent hurt, charges in like a bull in a china shop, throwing haymakers, just waiting to be counterpunched. Joshua, we've seen him gassed several times in fights. Don't know how his stamina would hold up over 12 rounds. Yeah, all three of them are very big punchers as well. You could always look at these fights and kind of have the perspective, whoever lands first, it could be all zero, you know. So these are not fights that you can pick with, you know, huge authority. But I will say, you know, a lot of people wanting an answer, so I'll put my colours to the mast. I would make Anthony Joshua a slight favourite in both of these matchups. I view Deontay Wilder at this point as the harder test out of Wilder and Parker. I think Wilder is a bigger hitter than Parker, and Wilder is also clearly a bigger man than Joseph Parker. And I think those two are relevant facts. Parker hits hard. Parker, for me, he's got a stream of highlight reel devastating knockouts at the lower level. As he stepped up in class, you know, the knockouts have ceased a little bit. Carlos Takam went the distance, Andy Ruiz went the distance, Hughie Fury went the distance. You know, more recently, Parker hasn't actually scored too many knockouts as he's moved into like fighting the heavyweight top 20. Deontay Wilder's KO ratio much higher. I believe he's something like 38 wins, 37 by knockout. So, yeah, Wilder Really is one of the biggest punches in the heavyweight division. He's also a lot bigger man. You know, against a guy like Joshua, Joseph Parker's going to have to work out how to get into range. He's going to have to deal with that problem. Wilder, he's got excellent ring coverage, as I would say. You know, he's a very, very big guy. You know, can catch you from a long, long way off. And I think that dynamic also makes it harder for Joshua to judge his own range and measure the distance. So I view Wilder as the bigger test of the two. I actually believe that Joshua is a slightly more refined boxer and a slightly more complete technical operator than either of the two other guys. I kind of think that Joshua would be able to back Wilder up, and he'd be the kind of guy who could time Wilder as Wilder sort of recklessly moved back or recklessly charged in. You know, I think if you've got a calm head in front of Deontay Wilder, if you can keep your wits about you, watch what he's doing, keep your eye out for that big right hand, make him miss and time him, I think Wilder could be there to be hit. So I would make Joshua a favourite in that fight. But I would say that obviously Wilder has a real chance. If Wilder could get his jab established against Joshua and start teeing off against Joshua, Wilder could just as easily take AJ out. But I do make AJ a favourite based on the fact that he's been tested at, you know, I know he's had a lot less fights than Wilder, but he's been tested at a higher level. You know, Wilder's best win is still Stiverne. AJ obviously has mixed it with Klitschko. You could make an argument that AJ's wins over Dillian White, AJ's wins over Carlos Takam are probably just about as good as anything that Wilder's done in his career to date. So AJ's been tested at a higher level, which I think is key. And I do think AJ is just that little bit more well-rounded in terms of his fundamentals, if you like. As for Joseph Parker, you know, Parker's an athlete. He's got great hand speed, great combination punching. But it's another one where Parker is very vulnerable to being timed. You know, Parker hasn't really ironed out some of the frailties that were in his game defensively on the way up. And, you know, a lot of people who are new to my channel, you know, think that I've got something against Joseph Parker. You know, the long-term viewers will know that, as you know, 4 years ago I was doing videos on Joseph Parker saying that I think he's going to be a future world champion. You know, I'm a fan of Joseph Parker, but he does have limited head movement. You know, he stands there with his head up in the air. He throws punches. His head is stiff up in the air, no head movement, hands down, chin up, waiting to be caught. And you know, I think he's been fortunate in his career to date that, you know, he's shown a lot of durability, and you know, he's had the beating of the opponents he's been in with. But I just don't think, no matter how good a chin you are, I don't think you can stand there with your chin like that against the likes of Joshua and against the likes of Deontay Wilder, especially these bigger guys who are going to be able to try and use their range against you a bit more. So you know, I think that would be a big problem for Joseph Parker going into such a fight. Now, could Parker try and take the fight to the inside on Anthony Joshua? Could Parker make it uncomfortable for Anthony Joshua on the inside? Very possibly. You know, both of these guys, if they could find a way of keeping their chins safe and dragging Joshua into the later rounds, I think the pace and the ambition they would bring would, you know, really ask major questions of Joshua's stamina. But, you know, in brief, and I don't want to make this video a 30-minute long video, in brief, you're asking me for my instinct, I would pick Joshua over both guys. I'd probably make Joshua a 65 to 35 favourite over Deontay Wilder. I'd probably make him either a 70-30 or 75-25 over Joseph Parker. Fundamentally, none of the three of them are perfect, but I believe defensively, Parker and Wilder have greater flaws than Anthony Joshua. And I think that when you're going in against a guy like Joshua, who's got the power to change the fight in the course of one shot, and who's got real length and real timing, I find it hard to pick those guys against Anthony Joshua when those defensive frailties exist. You know, clearly that's oversimplifying it. There's a lot more that's going on in a fight than you know, the defensive elements. Do both of the guys have certain offensive attributes to their game that could cause AJ real problems? Of course. But you know, when we're talking about fights where the first one to land could easily be the winner, then I'm not only looking at who's got the knockout streak, but I'm looking at who's got the defence. Now, I'm not saying AJ does have the defence. What I am saying is that for my money, Deontay Wilder and Joseph Parker do not have the defence. And that makes me lean towards Anthony Joshua in those fights. Either way, it's a fascinating time in heavyweight boxing. You know, Joshua versus Haye, Joshua versus White, Joshua versus a returning Tyson Fury, Joshua versus Parker, Joshua versus Wilder. Yes, please. Where do I sign? You know, if the fights can't be made, maybe Wilder Parker is a good fight. The difficulty is that the money just isn't there. You know, these guys know that the value is in the Joshua fight, because at present, I appreciate that Parker's a big pay-per-view star in New Zealand, but the numbers he's doing are just not comparable with that UK market. Deontay Wilder, as I understand it, hasn't really been on US pay-per-view. So if the two fought each other, they'd get a decent payday. I'm sure they'd sell a few tickets, some sort, but they're not selling out 70,000 seater stadiums. They're not going to be getting comparable money for the pay-per-view revenue to fight on free TV. And again, it's a profile thing. You know, this is why I have a level of sympathy when Eddie Hearn says that Deontay Wilder should fight Dillian White, because, you know, of course Deontay Wilder doesn't have to fight Dillian White. He's already an established champion, well above Dillian White. But, you know, that fight would propel Deontay Wilder's, you know, publicity tremendously in the UK market. You know, it would take him to a different stratosphere, and it would mean that casual market, who are Joshua's core customer, who may not know who he is, become immediately aware of him, and you know, that could mean megabucks. You know, so I can see why. From a Joseph Parker perspective, I know Joseph's come over to the UK and fought Hughie Fury, but if we're honest, that wasn't the a bill that really caught the UK public's imagination. You know, I don't know how many numbers it did. Obviously, it was on the YouTube pay-per-view. It wasn't a massive bill that, you know, would have taken his name over to the casual fan. You know, clearly Parker could fight Dillian White. Perhaps Parker could fight Tony Bellew. Those are both fights that Parker would be a big favourite in. You know, and that could yet again propel his name and you know, sell him to the casual fan, so that a future fight would really be exciting to the Joshua customers and make them want to part with their money for that pay-per-view. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. Long rambling video. Probably going to be unpopular for a number of things I've said, but this is just one man's opinion. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Will these fights happen? Am I wrong to be pessimistic? You know, as I say, I make Joshua a favourite in both right now. Frailties with all three of these guys, but I see the greater defensive flaws in Wilder and Parker, and I think it's tough to go into a fight with Anthony Joshua with those defensive flaws, in my opinion. Let me know your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this video, please take the time to hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't done so before, do subscribe to the channel so you can check out all of my other stuff. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for watching.